Hello, everyone, and namaskar. So, today's podcast is a continuation of the reading of the book titled Anandamurti, the Jamalpur Years. And this is a reading of the 17th chapter titled Problem of the Day. The accumulated distortions of many lifetimes cannot be removed in the twinkling of an eye. The removal of these distortions requires the prolonged cultivation of knowledge, selfless devotion, and untiring action. The world expects tremendous work from you, so you must not sit idle like a frog in a well under the spell of inertia. Therefore, arise and awake. On a chilly Saturday evening, January 26, 1958, between 500 and 600 disciples gathered together in the spacious courtyard of Nara Singh's manor house in Trimohan to watch the drama that was about to take place on the makeshift stage at the back of the compound. This was the first 2-day DMC program, and Shiva Shankar Banerjee, Bhagalpur's senior most acharya, had suggested that some form of entertainment be included in the festivities. A couple of local margis wrote up a rough script dealing with problems in the institution of marriage, a topic very much in the public eye at the time, and other members of the local unit bravely volunteered to act it out in front of the DMC crowd. Despite not having had time to rehearse, they took to the stage and performed a satire on widow remarriage and the dowry system that left the audience shaking with laughter, while Baba looked on from the window of his second-floor room. Baba's youngest brother, Manas, was in the audience, eagerly awaiting his first darshan of the master. He had been initiated 18 months earlier by Pranay and had been carefully kept in the dark as to the identity of the guru, though he did have his suspicions. The evening after his initiation, he approached his brother while Baba was massaging his mother's feet and told him that he had taken initiation into Anandamarga, expecting him to be happy at the news. "What?" Baba replied, to his surprise. "Who told you to do that? Why Anandamarga?" "Why is Pravada angry?" Manas thought. "I must have made a mistake. I don't know if he is the guru or not, but I know that he can answer any question that anyone puts to him. Even if he is not the guru, he knows everything. So I must have committed a mistake by taking initiation into Anandamarga." A couple of days later, Baba approached him and said in a conciliatory tone of voice, "After further reflection, I think it's okay. Go ahead and try to practice. It's not bad." Manas felt relieved. As he remarked years later, "At least I had done something that was not bad." After the drama concluded, Baba came out of his room and descended the stairs. Shouts of "Parampita Baba Ki Jai, victory to the Supreme Father," rang through the courtyard. When Manas saw his brother making his way toward the stage, he turned to the margi next to him and asked, "Where is Baba? I don't see him." The margi pointed to his brother and said, "What do you mean, you don't see him? That's Baba." Manas gave a shout, overjoyed to discover that his brother was indeed the guru of Anandamarga. A transport of ecstasy swept over him, and a couple of concerned acharyas, who had been secretly deputed to look after him, worriedly sent word to Baba on stage that his brother had become abnormal. Baba sent back a message that they were not to worry. Manas recovered after a few hours, but by his own admission, he would remain somewhat abnormal for the next few months. After Baba took his seat on the dais and listened to a couple of devotional songs, he delivered a lengthy discourse that was unlike any he had given before. He entitled it Problem of the Day and began with the idea of the creation as a common patrimony. Parama Purusha is my father, and Parama Prakriti is my mother. The universe is my home, and all of us are citizens of this cosmos. This universe is the imagination of the macrocosmic mind, and all entities are being created, preserved, and destroyed in the extroversive and introversive phases of the cosmic imaginative flow. In a personal way, when a person imagines something in their mind, for that moment, that person is the owner of the thing and no one else. When a thought-born human being roams about in an imaginary cornfield, the imaginary person is not the owner of that field. Rather, the one who is imagining it is. This universe is created in the imagination of Brahma, the supreme entity. So the ownership of this universe lies with Brahma and not with the microcosms created out of Brahma's imagination. None of the property of this earth, movable or immovable, belong to any particular individual. Everything is a common patrimony of all. After developing the idea of human society as a joint family, pointing out that nature has not assigned any portion of this property to any particular individual, and drawing parallels to the traditional property rights of joint families in ancient India, Baba launched into a scathing indictment of capitalism, making no effort to mince his words. The capitalists of this modern world are anti-dharma, anti-social creatures. To accumulate their massive wealth, they reduce others to skin and bones, forcing them to die of starvation. To dazzle people with the glamour of their garments, they compel others to wear rags. To increase their own vital strength, they suck dry the vital juice of others. A member of a joint family cannot be considered a social being if he or she does not possess the feeling of oneness with the other members of that family, or if he or she does not want to accept the lofty ideal of joint rights and the principle of rationality. The analysis of capitalism that followed led Baba to a conclusion that will soon see him branded in India as a social revolutionary. When the entire property of the universe is the common inheritance of all its creatures, how can there be any justification for a system in which some are rolling in the lap of luxury, while others are dying for want of a handful of grain? Considering the collective interest of all living beings, it is essential that capitalism be eradicated. It was Baba's contention that the capitalist mentality, or as he put it, the ambition to become rich by exploiting others, was a psychic disease. If the longing of the human mind does not find the proper path leading to psychic and spiritual fulfillment, it becomes engaged in accumulating excessive physical wealth by depriving others. When capitalists declare, "We have amassed wealth by our talent and labor. If others have the capacity and diligence, let them also do the same. Nobody is preventing them," they do not care to realize that the volume of commodities on the earth is limited, whereas the requirement is common to all. Excessive individual affluence, in most cases, deprives others of the minimum requirements of life. Baba went on to discuss what methods should be adopted to put an end to capitalism, while he emphasized that nothing would be better, if it were possible, than the eradication of capitalism by friendly persuasion and humanistic appeals. He made it clear that the untold millions who were suffering could not wait indefinitely for good sense to prevail among the exploiters. His argument flew directly into the face of the Gandhian ideal of nonviolence, an ideal that was, as Baba would later explain, a distortion of the ancient yogic principle of ahimsa, non-injury to other living beings. Though the humanistic approach works in some cases, in most instances, it does not produce any result. And even where it does work, it takes a very long time. So, wherever necessary, Capitalism must be forced to abandon its ferocious hunger by taking strong measures. Tremendous circumstantial pressure will have to be created. To create this circumstantial pressure, the application of force is absolutely necessary. Those who believe that the non-application of force alone is ahimsa are bound to fail. No problem in this world can be solved by adopting this kind of ahimsa. Later in the discourse, Baba again returned to the subject of nonviolence while discussing the peace movement and the difference between sentient and static peace. If any country perpetrates atrocities on its minorities or attacks any weak neighbor, then the other neighbors should take up arms. By mobilizing the required force, they should restrain the tyrant in order to establish sentient peace. This is why people who want to restore sentient peace will have to make continual efforts to acquire strength. It is impossible for goats to establish sentient peace in the society of tigers. Sadly, those who hold the view that nonviolence is non-use of force can neither establish sentient peace nor can they defend hard-earned freedom. In a country where the Gandhian ideal of nonviolence was revered by public and politicians alike, it was an argument that would not only place Baba firmly on the side of the more radical social revolutionaries, but which would eventually earn him a reputation among governmental authorities as a dangerous figure in Indian society. After establishing that it was in the best interests of human beings that capitalism be eradicated, Baba continued with a discussion of how to reorganize society. This begins, he asserted, with economic decentralization, the creation of self-sufficient economic regions, and the management of industry, agriculture, trade, and commerce through cooperative organizations. In his view, only those enterprises that are either too small or too large and complex to be successfully managed as cooperatives, such as very small businesses or large-scale industries like energy and steel, should be managed either by individuals or by state or local governments. As the discussion unfolded, Baba touched on a number of different social ills, such as the caste system, discrimination against women, provincialism, and communalism, the misuse of science, and so on. He offered solutions in each of these areas, and this led him to the question of politics. The colors of casteism, provincialism, communalism, and nationalism keep fading with the progress of time. The human beings of today must understand that in the near future, they will have to accept universalism. Those who seek to promote social welfare will have to mobilize all their vitality and intellect in the endeavor to establish the world government, abandoning all plans to form communal or national organizations. While addressing the various obstacles standing in the way of the formation of a world government, Baba suggested that the biggest hurdle was local leaders' fear of losing their power and influence within their respective communities. In order to circumvent these obstacles, he proposed a gradual transition to a world government, beginning with its introduction as a law-framing body, with the administrative power remaining temporarily in the hands of the different countries, and then proceeding step by step to an eventual ceding of that power to the global body. As the local government will not have any power to enact laws arbitrarily, it will not be easy for any government to inflict atrocities on its linguistic, religious, or political minorities according to the whims of the governing majority. While addressing the ills of party politics, calling it a malady more dangerous than germs, he suggested that a future world government would be established by those working outside the ambit of political conflicts. The greatest social welfare for the human race will be accomplished if those who aspire to establish the world government, or Ananda Parivara, engage themselves only in constructive activities and selfless service, instead of wasting their vital energy in the vortex of politics or in political conflicts. Those states which cooperate with such missionaries in their social service activities will be considered to be desirous of establishing the world government, or Ananda Parivara. The common people of those states which do not cooperate will become agitated, and those agitated people will form the world government, or Ananda Parivara, through revolution. In his political analysis, Baba did not hesitate to point out the defects inherent in democracy. He emphasized that, as a system of government, democracy cannot be accepted as the highest and best. Among all the systems human beings have been able to devise so far, democracy cannot be considered to be the best of a bad lot. After discussing some of these defects, he gave his disciples the first glimpse of the principles of governance that would become a cornerstone of his social philosophy. Leadership, he suggested, can only be entrusted to those who have attained a high measure of ethical, mental, and spiritual perfection through rigorous training. Such people he called Sadvipras. To them, he assigned the responsibility of guiding society. Having already asserted that a classless society is a utopian and impractical ideal, Baba offered an analysis of the cyclical movement of society as a movement from the dominance of one psychic class to another, with human society being composed of four predominant mentalities: the Shudra, or working class mentality; the Kshatriya, or warrior mentality; the Vipra, or intellectual mentality; and the Vaishya, or capitalist mentality. At any one time, one of these four classes dominates. The social cycle moves from Shudra to Kshatriya, to Vipra, to Vaishya. Most advanced countries at present being in the midst of the first Vaishyan age, with either revolution or evolution affecting the transition from one age to another. In the past, he reasoned, the ruling class has always exploited the masses. Hence, the leadership of society must be entrusted to Sadvipras, who imbibe the best qualities of all four classes, and who hold as their firm ideal the welfare of each and every member of society. Only they, he said, can represent human beings selflessly. Baba ended his discourse with an ancient Sanskrit verse from the Rig Veda, humanity's oldest surviving literature. He called it the Chorus of the Sadvipras. Samga Chadvam, Samba Dadvam, Sambo Mana, Sijanatam, Devavagam Jata Purve, Samjanana Upasate, Samaban Akuti, Samana Hridaya Nivan, Samana Astu Bomano, Yataban Susasati. Let us move together. Let us sing together. Let us come to know our minds together. Let us share like sages of the past, so that all people together may enjoy the universe. Unite our intentions. Let our hearts be inseparable. Let our minds be as one mind, as we, to truly know one another, become one. The next morning, Baba announced the formation of the first subsidiary wing of Anandamarga, Renaissance Universal. The purpose of RU, as Baba began referring to it, was to provide a platform for intellectuals and artists to discuss the burning issues of the day, and through these conferences and discussions, to disseminate progressive ideas among the intelligentsia, students, and interested members of the general populace. He called his senior disciples together for a meeting and asked them to start forming RU clubs in their respective towns and cities. The first program of the RU Club would be to host public discussions on important current issues and invite prominent and progressive speakers to address the audience and mediate the subsequent discussion. He also announced that from then on, he would give an RU discourse on the evening before his DMC discourse. Problem of the day, he said, should be considered his inaugural RU discourse. Although not everyone was paying close attention to Baba's talk, many devotees were content simply to watch Baba and immerse themselves in the devotional mood. The discourse struck a powerful chord among many of them, especially among the numerous students who had begun taking initiation in increasing numbers, as the family acharyas concentrated more of their prachar efforts in the schools and colleges of Bihar. A little more than a decade had passed since India had attained its independence, and the large student population of the day, who had grown into adulthood in a free and independent India, had become increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress they perceived in their country's struggle to rise out of the quagmire of poverty and join the community of developing nations. The high hopes that had accompanied the struggle for India's freedom had mostly faded, as idealistic students and intelligentsia became aware, in Baba's words, that they had traded the white exploiters for brown exploiters. Frustration continued to mount when it became clear that the capitalist machinery and endemic political corruption had not left with the British, but had simply changed its colors. Even some who ostensibly supported the government were able to recognize the warning signs. In early 1958, Rajagopalachari, writer-statesman and India's first Governor-General, wrote, "Political emancipation and democracy, instead of cultivating a sense of humanity and responsibility, have been allowed to intoxicate majority caste groups with the thirst for power and tyranny and electoral corruption of the unprivileged classes." A few weeks later, The Economist, John Mathai, India's first railway minister, wrote, "The momentum created in the earlier years of independence is subsiding and giving way to a spirit of passive acceptance of the inevitable. We seem to be at the beginning of a period of mental stagnation and lack of purposeful activity. Respect for law is gradually diminishing, and the sense of unity which filled us in the first flush of fulfilled nationalism is disappearing." For many Indians, only a few years removed from decades of the struggle for freedom, whose greatest heroes remain the revolutionary heroes of those days, such as Subhash Bose, Aurobindo, and Gandhi, it was a difficult reality to accommodate. The Margis, especially the younger ones, were not immune from such feelings. In the days and weeks that followed, the excitement amongst the younger and more revolutionary-minded disciples mushroomed rapidly as news of Baba's discourse circulated among those who had not been present. Baba had hinted at his view of capitalism in a brief paragraph in Charya Charya on economic policy, where he first mentioned the idea of the joint family. But none of them were prepared for problem of the day. For many who hungered for change, it was a revelation to discover that Baba was a more radical social thinker than they had imagined. His words gave shape to their inarticulate desires for a better and more just world. While some of the older Margis wondered if it were not a utopian dream, most took it as a promise that the ideal society they longed for was an inevitable part of humanity's future. The discourse was soon published in booklet form, for which Baba wrote the following dedication: "To the great hero, Subhash Chandra Bose, whom I did love, and whom I do love even now. It was not only a reference to the various demonstrations in which Baba has shown that the revolutionary hero was still alive, but even more so, a signal that it was time for a revolutionary consciousness to take birth among his disciples. Unbeknownst to the disciples, Baba had begun dictating a book on social philosophy during his lunch break at the office, a couple of months before delivering his Problem of the Day discourse. These noontime dictation sessions had long since become a regular part of his office life. In the previous few years, he had used them to redictate his DMC discourses, which were collected into the series entitled Subhasita Samgraha. His regular stenographer was Sushil Dar, a co-worker and initiate from a different department. Several Margis were deputed to take notes during the DMC talks, but these notes ended up being more of a synopsis of Baba's discourse, since none of them were trained in shorthand and Baba spoke quicker than anyone could write. At a later date, Sushil would bring these notes with him to the office. Baba would ask him to read out the first couple of lines, and thereafter, he would begin dictating the original discourse over again in his mother tongue, Bengali, often expanding on a topic that had been limited by the time constraints of a spoken lecture. The new book, a separate work, rather than the redictation of an earlier talk, was entitled Human Society Part 1, consisting of 5 chapters. It began with a chapter on ethics, wherein Baba laid out the true foundation of his social philosophy, the premise that an ideal human society can only be achieved when that society is founded on a universal code of ethics derived from a universal spiritual outlook. By extension, the leaders of that society must be those who have most perfected themselves in the practice of that code of ethics. His analysis of human ethics contained a sharp look at the divisive role that the different world religions have played in human history, and the prevalence of dogmatic thinking and intolerance in those institutions. The chapter concluded with his summation of the meaning of the concepts society and social progress. When morality leads human beings to the fullest expression of their finer human qualities, then alone is its practical value fully realized. The concerted effort to bridge the gap between the first expression of morality and establishment in universal humanism is called social progress. And the collective body of those who are engaged in the concerted effort to conquer this gap, I call society. In the remaining chapters, Baba discussed education, social justice, the judicial system, and the role of different professions. He analyzed the impact of these areas of human life on human society, the problems facing humanity at this juncture in our evolution, and the role that each area needs to play in the formation of an ideal society. With the appearance of Problem of the Day and Human Society Part 1, the disciples now had a social philosophy to go along with their already extensive spiritual philosophy. The spirit of that social philosophy had been summed up in Baba's very first DMC discourse, The Gradual Evolution of Society, back on New Year's Day, 1955. But what had been a distant image on the horizon would now become a part of their daily reality. From this point forward, Baba would begin laying even stronger emphasis on his mission, exhorting his disciples not only to spread the ideals of spirituality and do social service, but to work toward the formation of an ideal human society, asking them to shoulder nothing less than full responsibility for the transformation of a planet. The Margis were aware that they were few in number, and that the ideal that Baba held out before them was seemingly beyond their reach, or at best, distantly remote. But Baba would not accept any faint-heartedness from them, and they were able to understand what he repeatedly reminded them. If they wanted to be great themselves, they would have to adopt a great ideal and keep that ideal always in front of them. What ideal could be greater than this, they asked? To work toward the creation of an ideal society while they walked the path to spiritual illumination. Thank you.